Hello and welcome to the second presentation on Smart Restart for Special Education during COVID-19, Services, Process, and Procedures. As we know, students with disabilities have very unique needs. Not one plan will fit all students. There are some students whose disability has a significant impact on their adaptive skills. Those are the skills that enable a person to be self-directed and more independent. There are other students whose disability does not extend into adaptive skill needs. The information in this presentation is really focused on the students whose adaptive skills are not significantly impacted by their disability. This presentation will cover Fargo Public Schools learning plans, our current status, special education lens from early childhood special education, elementary, and middle and high school. We will discuss IEP meetings, individualized contingency plans, communication between parents and schools, how a teacher's work week will look, free and appropriate public education with parent choice, and parental rights. This slide again is just to show you as a reminder the different levels that Fargo Public Schools may enter into at any given time, determined by the impact of COVID on the community. The next slide will be discussing early childhood special education services. Special education services will be provided to students in the early childhood special education program on the days that they are in the school building. We are still planning on group sizes and schedules in order to minimize the number of different people with whom students are interacting and in contact with. We will attempt to fit in all related services, but also know that we need to balance that with the important social, emotional, adaptive, and pre-academic growth that these students require. The next two slides will be discussing elementary school special education during COVID-19. For those students who are members or signed up for the virtual academy, meaning 100% of their education will be provided through distance learning, special education time will need to either push into the general education services that are being provided virtually or pulled out of those sessions, depending upon the student's ICP or individualized contingency plan, which will need to be created with family and school to determine how those services will look. You need to know that your child, it is most likely that your child will not have the same service provider that they have had in the past. We've had to assign certain teachers to become virtual providers as others need to serve through the hybrid model, as well as some students who are on site 5 days a week. It is also possible that the team, when we're creating the individualized contingency plan for virtual delivery of services, that we might need to look at altering service minutes. The team will be expected to consider the environment in which the student is learning and design the program that meets FAPE for that child during virtual learning. As you know, the hybrid learning model for elementary is a combination of students being in site in a building and having asynchronous learning opportunities when they are not with their teachers, working on assignments and other tasks that were provided during the in-person instruction. We will make every effort to have special education services provided to students on the days that they are in the building. Our teachers who will come on site next week need to still plan for group size and schedules in order to minimize the number of different people with whom the students are in contact. Our special education minutes will be recorded on a monthly basis. This does not mean a reduction in services in any way. It allows the flexibility of the special education teachers to be able to create a number of different groups in order to minimize the number of students in them, and also allow for indirect service time to be provided so teachers can hold individualized contingency plan and IEP meetings, as well as create those plans so you have them in your hands in a short amount of time. The next 7 slides are about middle and high school special education services during COVID-19. As you have been informed, education for secondary will come in different phases. At the start of the school year, phase 1 includes the start of the school year, September 2nd, and will go through October 2nd. Students will be in school every second or third day to develop the relationships with their teachers and peers before entering into a full distance learning on October 2nd, 2020. Phase 2 runs from October 2nd to December 10th, 2020. At this time, it's anticipated that students who have disabilities and are self-directed would receive academic and special education services through their distance learning model. Special education teachers and related service providers will work to schedule students in either classes or during sessions of pull-out time in combination or in collaboration with the varied service providers. When your child is on campus, you can expect them to follow an 8-period schedule, each class period being 38 minutes with 4 minutes of passing time. Your child will see their special education teacher and, if applicable, their related service providers at their scheduled time to receive their special education minutes. In order to minimize the number of buildings that school staff move between, we may be providing some related services via Zoom. If we do this, the therapist, the occupational therapist or physical therapist may be Zooming in, and your child will have a paraeducator alongside of them during the session if required in order to receive the service. During the full distance learning phase in secondary schools, all students will receive all classes through the distance learning model. Special education classes will be scheduled as they are if your child was in person. The length of the class time may be shorter. We will need to work with individualized student plans in order to determine the amount of paraeducator support that is required. Please know that some classes will have paraeducator support alongside, and other classes may use paraeducators for individualized services per student need. Students will also receive their related services via distance learning. The individualized contingency plan will have to determine the best way in order to do this. The services will be provided by Zoom and can range from small groups to individualized instructions. And again, special education teachers may also have access to paraeducators for breakout sessions depending upon student needs. Your child's teacher and related service providers will create and distribute any electronic or hard copy materials that are needed. The virtual academy for the high school is done through the North Dakota Center for Distance Education. High school students may choose to attend the FPS Virtual Academy through the North Dakota Center for Distance Education for fall semester or a full year. Support services for special education will be provided in a distance learning environment, and schedules will have to be determined with families and students to work in with their asynchronous learning through the North Dakota Center for Distance Education. Time will need to be allotted for the implementation of these special education services beyond the expected time that your child may be working in the virtual academy. So it will require students and parents to work out a schedule. Our teachers will be reaching out to families in order to determine what time frame they will be receiving their special education services. We have been in communication with the North Dakota Center for Distance Education regarding accommodations that they are able to provide for students with individualized learning plans. As you read through this slide, know that through years of trial and error, these are the accommodations that they find work in the distance learning environment, an asynchronous distance learning environment that is provided through their center. For those parents who have students who have signed up for classes through the North Dakota Center for Distance Education, you can contact Jocelyn Coley at the North Dakota Center for Distance Education, and her contact information is on this slide. There are some students whose IEP team determined the need for alternative programming. So these programs are not open as a choice per se, but students' IEP teams have determined that this is the programming required for free and appropriate public education. Administration and staff is meeting to finalize plans, but it'll likely mirror changes that we see in the middle school for our educational day program. September would be an on-site schedule, and we are actually looking to maintain on-site schedule for the full school year. Tentative proposed schedule would be 9 o'clock to 1:30. We are still working on plans about that. Both the general education and special education services will be provided when students are on site. There are students who attend Woodrow Wilson Alternative High School who have limited special education needs. Students who are in this program are enrolled by students if they're their own guardian or parents. The classes that students are part of are very self-directive classes with some additional support. There are, as I said before, limited special education services provided to students. Woodrow Wilson Alternative High School will run its regular schedule with students with 1/3 the class size on campus, while 2/3 are at distance learning. The remaining of this presentation is regarding IDEA and procedures that will occur during this time of different education during COVID. When we were first closed down due to COVID, many IDEA type meetings had to be postponed due to an inability to be able to meet. During starting the school year, all students will receive their annual IEP meetings. From those IEP meetings, we may be creating what is also called an individualized contingency plan for those students who will be receiving services either virtually 100% or in the hybrid model. As per IDEA, we will always look to find a mutually agreed upon date and time. Due to the difference in altered schedules, we just ask for flexibility as we work to find these times. As I said earlier, with some elementary teachers and secondary teachers, we're looking at creating IEP services on a monthly minute basis. This will allow flexibility in working out time so we can have meetings offered throughout the day in order to have that mutually agreed upon place and time. Most meetings we anticipate will be held virtually. We can look at having accommodations for those that we believe really require in-person, face-to-face. The location of those meetings will need to be determined at that time based upon the number of individuals expected to be in the room. We do have a backlog of assessments and IEP paperwork that is due to COVID-19. We will try to get as many meetings that can be done as soon as possible. It is important for special educators to have an indirect workday in order to complete this major task. And again, that's why we are looking at scheduling monthly meetings. This is not a reduction in services in any way. It is just redistributing the number of days that the student gets the service. This, of course, is determined by the IEP plan. We are also looking to find retired teachers who might be willing to conduct assessments. We continue to look at how we can add to our staff for a short period of time in order to accomplish the major backlog that has occurred. We also are investigating the possibility of involving teletherapy company to help complete some of these tasks. As you know, there's a shortage in special education and related service providers actually in the state of North Dakota as well as across the nation. Many districts are moving to the help of a teletherapy company in order to meet the needs. We will determine that after teachers have had time to look at scheduling and what needs to be accomplished. We will make every effort for your child's case manager to remain the same. There is no intent to change case management at this time. We will have to look for increased communication among service providers and case managers, but just know that it may not be entirely possible due to assignments, but again, we will make every effort to maintain that same case manager. In previous slides, I've mentioned the Individualized Contingency Plan, or ICP. One of these was created during the emergency COVID situation we found ourselves in on March 13th. We may continue to use individualized contingency plans for students whose services and style is altered dramatically from the typical services if COVID did not exist. We're talking about students who might be receiving their education 100% virtually, We're also talking about the situation that's been imposed upon school districts to choose how to serve kids during COVID, in which case you know that the majority of our elementary students are moving to a hybrid, days on site as well as days off site. Our secondary is moving 100% virtual or distance learning after October 2nd. So we will need to have, alongside of the Stay Put IEP, that IEP plan that you're used to receiving paperwork on, we will also need to continue to have individualized contingency plans because services might look different given these unique times. The paperwork that you'll see for individualized contingency plans has been updated a little bit, and what we've included is a service delivery grid on that. It looks very similar, actually pretty exact to what you would find on a Stay Put IEP. It talks about the special education services that are needed, how often and how much time is needed, what type of service provider is required, and the location of services. Example, and what makes this different from the Stay Put IEP is that the location of services might be your home because the child is using distance learning via an online platform. We'll also talk about the length of service time because we don't know how long we will be having effects of COVID in our district, in our nation. We will be recording the length of the plan as 9 months. As we find out if we have to move into a different level of services or instructional models, then plans will need to be amended as that occurs. Communication with teachers and therapists is as important as it ever has been. With students not on site 100% of the time, we know that parents need to be kept aware of what is happening and how they can help support their own child. Thank you for those of you who completed our survey. We read loud and clear that the majority of parents would like to hear from their case manager at least weekly. This is not to say that some individualized planning can't be made for more communication, but we will ensure that this message is passed on to case managers. And we also heard that you would like to hear more from the related service providers. And so that message too will be sent along and forwarded to them. Please know that the amount of communication may look different for each student's needs and each family's needs, and that there might be different methods that are used. We will go with parent preference if you prefer an email or a phone call or in writing. Again, we want to make sure that you are aware of what is occurring in your child's world of education in order for planning to be as effective as possible. Fargo Public Schools is really looking to support our teachers, which we know will in turn support you and your child. We are working to determine how, regardless of instructional models, that we can have our special education teachers serving actively and directly for 4 days per week, and also looking to find a way to provide those teachers with an indirect student workday 1 day per week. The direct services is the time that your child's special educator spends working directly with your child on his or her goals. What we mean by indirect services are items such as collaboration with teachers and paraeducators, conducting the IEP meetings, completing the IDA paperwork, and having time to review data. Also very important in this indirect service time is the ability for special educators to observe your child in their regular education setting. So this indirect time is very much important and always has been an important part of a special education teacher's assignment. So we just, especially with the backlog, need to look at ensuring that they have the time to complete what needs to be done in the amount of time that it needs to be done. As mentioned previously, on the IEP meeting, on your IEP paperwork or your contingency plan paperwork, you will note that our minutes will be recorded monthly rather than weekly. Once again, this is to allow that flexibility of service in order to provide a day of indirect services for your child's case manager to work on those other very important tasks that happen beyond seeing students directly. We want to make sure that you understand that this is not a reduction in minutes. It is a redistribution of when those minutes are provided. And we want to make sure that the services minutes that are provided work toward providing that free and appropriate public education for your child to access general education. Just a word about free and appropriate public education and parent choice of instructional model. We want to let you know that we understand the very difficult decision that you're faced with on whether to send your child to the brick and mortar school or to have your child learn in a 100% virtual learning environment. As a team, we are working to be prepared to make adjustments to plans as needed in order for FAPE to be provided. Please know that our teachers will be taking data on a very frequent basis in order to help teams make a decision on whether the service delivery model is an effective delivery of free and appropriate public education for your child. And please know that mutual agreed upon place time meetings will be held in discussing whether we are able to meet that requirement of FAPE in the current instructional model that your child will be in. And as always, as parents of children who have special education needs, you have parental rights in special education. You can find a copy of this parent right booklet on the North Dakota Department of Public Instruction. Note that there is a link there provided to you. If you would like a printed copy, please email Penny Lassard or Shirley Lamont to request this printed copy, and we will mail it to you. And you could reach Penny and Shirley at the following email addresses as well. We know again that this is a very difficult time for all parents, and those parents who have students, children with special education needs have an additional layer of concern. We really want to work with you in order to provide your child's free and appropriate public education in a way that you too believe will be effective. Please do not hesitate to call or contact our office if you have questions regarding this presentation.